There's no way I can express to you how important this video is and how vital it is for you to share it with everybody you know. It'd be a pretty safe guess that most Americans don't know about the recent Trump executive order. The order number is 14288, and the title is Strengthening and Unleashing America's Law Enforcement to Pursue Criminals and Protect Innocent Citizens. It was issued on April 25th, 2025, and published in the Federal Record on May 2nd, 2025. And whether you're aware and concerned about an overreaching, all-powerful police state, or you're just one of those ignorant Americans blindly supporting the Thin Blue Line gang that has a monopoly on violence, brutality, and theft, you need to pay attention to the wording of this clearly Orwellian presidential edict. There are only 7 sections, and it's very short, and we're going to go through every freedom-trampling word. First, we can't leave the title before pointing out that one of the last things you want to do is unleash the power of an organization, which is the well-known American police force, that has one of the most well-documented, consistent abuses of power in human history. To confirm this, you only need to read the conclusion of the Mueller Commission, which set out to investigate the allegations of police corruption in the NYPD. And just as a side note, the NYPD is the largest police force in the world, not just in the US. The Mueller Commission was a continuation of the Knapp Commission, which was conducted 2 decades prior on the same NYPD as a result of publicized accounts of police wrongdoing. This was revealed by Patrolman Frank Serpico and Sergeant David Dirk. Now, briefly, the Knapp Commission concluded that within the NYPD was, quote, systemic corruption not limited to a few bad apples. Officers regularly engaged in bribery, extortion, and other illegal activities, often tied to organized crime like gambling, narcotics, and prostitution. The Knapp Commission identified grass eaters, who are officers who passively accepted the bribes, and meat eaters, those who actively sought out illegal profits. Grass eaters were more common, but meat eaters caused greater harm. Corruption was enabled by a lack of oversight, poor accountability, and this thin blue line code of silence among officers where loyalty to colleagues trumped reporting misconduct. The Knapp Commission led to the creation of the Internal Affairs Division. Did it help? Of course not. The foxes were put in charge of the henhouse. And 22 years later, the Mueller Commission concluded in July 1994, quote, today's corruption is not the corruption of Knapp Commission days. Corruption then was largely a corruption of accommodation, of criminals and police officers giving and taking bribes, buying and selling protection. Corruption was, in the Knapp Commission days, in its essence, consensual. Today's corruption is characterized by brutality, theft, abuse of authority, and active police criminality. So things got worse, not better. And if that's true of America's largest police force, it would be absolute fantasy to suggest that the same mentality doesn't permeate every police and sheriff's department across the nation. And yet, Trump wants to unleash that corrupt, abusive force on the American people. Of course, under the guise of pursuing criminals and protecting innocent citizens. Here's what it says. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered, Section 1, Purpose and Policy. Safe communities rely on the backbone and heroism of a tough and well-equipped police force. Everybody needs to understand that there is no heroism in a group of people whose primary objective it is to make it home safe at the end of their shift, no matter what. Officer safety is the primary focus in the minds of every law enforcement agent. They don't care what rights have to be trampled or whose life has to be placed on the chopping block to bring that to pass. Officer safety is cowardice, not heroism. And these are the cowards Trump wants to unleash against all of us. He says, my administration is steadfastly committed to empowering state and local law enforcement to firmly police dangerous criminal behavior and protect innocent citizens. The clear question from this is, who is going to define dangerous criminal behavior? Empower to what extent? Well, we're going to see that in a second. When local leaders demonize law enforcement and impose legal and political handcuffs that make aggressively enforcing the law impossible, crime thrives and innocent citizens and small business owners suffer. You can't demonize demons. That makes as much sense as liquefying water. Trump wants to give these uniformed demons more room to aggressively enforce unconstitutional laws against the people in the name of protection and service. He says, my administration will therefore establish best practices at the state and local level for cities to unleash high-impact local police forces, protect and defend law enforcement officers wrongly accused and abused by state or local officials, and surge resources to officers in need. My administration will work to ensure that law enforcement officers across America focus on ending crime, not pursuing harmful, illegal race and sex-based equity policies. The result will be a law-abiding society in which tenacious law enforcement officers protect the innocent, violations of the law are not tolerated, and American communities are safely enjoyed by all their citizens again. And that's the problem with being an order-following law enforcer. They are just there to do their jobs, to do what they're told. What they're told to do is act as the enforcement agents of the political class. They're there to enforce laws, most of which conflict with the unalienable rights of the people. Section 2, legal defense of law enforcement officers. The Attorney General shall take all appropriate action to create a mechanism to provide legal resources and indemnification to law enforcement officers who unjustly incur expenses and liabilities for actions taken during the performance of their official duties to enforce the law. This mechanism shall include the use of private sector pro bono assistance for such law enforcement officers. So this additional indemnification will be placed on top of the qualified immunity cops enjoy in nearly every state. When you tell a man that if he makes a mistake or is neglectful or abusive while carrying out his duties, you've given him a get out of jail free card. And that's exactly what Trump aims to do with this executive order. Section 3, empowering state and local law enforcement. The Attorney General and other appropriate heads of executive departments and agencies shall take all appropriate action to maximize the use of federal resources, provide new best practices to state and local law enforcement to aggressively police communities against all crimes, expand access and improve the quality of training available to state and local law enforcement. Wonder if the IDF will play a part in that. Increase pay and benefits for law enforcement officers. Strengthen and expand legal protections for law enforcement officers. Seek enhanced sentences for crimes against law enforcement officers. Promote investment in the security and capacity of prisons, and increase the investment in and collection, distribution, and uniformity of crime data across jurisdictions. Within 60 days of the date of this order, the Attorney General shall review all ongoing federal consent decrees, out-of-court agreements, and post-judgment orders to which a state or local law enforcement agency is a party, and modify, rescind, or move to conclude such measures that unduly impede the performance of law enforcement functions. They're going to get everything out of the way of law enforcement so they can do anything they want, anytime they want, with unlimited, seemingly unlimited funds. To summarize this section, we're going to give corrupt, power-hungry cops more power, more protection, and more pay. And in this next section, Trump also wants to give corrupt departments more provisions. Section 4, using national security assets for law and order. Within 90 days of the date of this order, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security and the heads of agencies as appropriate, shall increase the provision of excess military and national security assets in local jurisdictions to assist state and local law enforcement. In other words, our beat cops aren't funded enough. They're not militarized enough. The standing armies our forefathers warned us about will be provided with military-grade assets to be unleashed on our streets to ensure that they thoroughly protect and serve and terrorize the life out of us. Imagine the deployment of military-grade drones, weapons, and vehicles on American soil. Nearly all the founding fathers of this nation expressed serious concerns about standing armies in the homeland. Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to David Humphreys in 1789, warned that standing armies could become tools of oppression. He said, quote, "There are instruments so dangerous to the rights of the nation and which place them so totally at the mercy of their governors that those governors, whether legislative or executive, should be restrained from keeping such instruments on foot." See, Jefferson favored reliance on a citizen militia over a professional and even federalized army. Sam Adams expressed his distrust of standing armies, noting that they were often used by monarchs to subjugate people. He wrote, quote, "A standing army, however necessary it may be at times, is always dangerous to the liberties of the people. Soldiers are apt to consider themselves as a body distinct from the rest of the citizens." What Trump has done with this executive order is unleash, fund, and empower a standing army in direct opposition to the American people. B, within 90 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall determine how military and national security assets, training, non-lethal capabilities, and personnel can most effectively be utilized, of course, to prevent crime. Section 5, holding state and local officials accountable. The Attorney General shall pursue all necessary legal remedies and enforcement measures to enforce the rights of Americans impacted by crime, and shall prioritize prosecution of any applicable violations of federal criminal law with respect to state and local jurisdictions whose officials A, willfully and unlawfully direct the obstruction of criminal law, including by directly and unlawfully prohibiting law enforcement officers from carrying out duties necessary for public safety and law enforcement, or B, unlawfully engage in discrimination or civil rights violations under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that restrict law enforcement activity or endanger citizens. In other words, using the leftist wedge issue of DEI, which is all authoritarian, anti-free market BS, Trump promises to come after your local leaders for attempting to hold cops responsible and accountable for their tyrannical actions. Section 6, use of Homeland Security task forces. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall utilize the Homeland Security task forces formed in accordance with Executive Order 14159 of January 20th, 2025, which is protecting the American people against invasion, to coordinate and advance the objectives of this order. You know, the objectives of unleashing an unbridled, well-empowered, well-equipped military force on American soil. And lastly, Section 7, General Provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof, or the functions of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B, this order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C, this order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any part against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. D, the Department of Justice shall provide funding for this order's publication in the Federal Register. Basically, this last section is the disclaimer that the federal government won't transgress the current law as they go ahead and demolish your freedoms under the executive order guise of keeping you safe from big bad criminals. We got to understand, even George Washington in his farewell address in 1796 warned against overgrown military establishments which he believed were inauspicious to liberty and could undermine civilian control of government. The founders' all-consuming worry was that a standing army, like Trump wants to unleash on us Americans, that is loyal to a central authority could be weaponized to suppress dissent, enforce unjust laws, or support a tyrannical federal or centralized government. And we all know they had firsthand experience with this by way of British military abuses before the revolution began. It was the reason for the revolution. They advocated for militias and strict civilian oversight to safeguard liberty. See, Trump wants to unleash military assets against you and me in the name of stamping out crime. The question is, are we going to continue to tolerate this tyranny? Like and share this video with everybody you know right now. This information has got to get out. The link to the entire executive order is in the description. Leave your comment below. How do we stop this tyranny? I'll see you in the next video.